How did this church even come to be in the first place? Okay. But we're going to start all the way from the beginning, from Jesus' time. Not all the way like Genesis, but at least from Jesus. Okay. So, do you guys know where this is? Okay, this is Egypt right here. What do we call this right now? Nowadays. Okay, Middle East right here. So more Middle East more right here. This is modern day Turkey. This is Italy. What is this? This is Greece, right?
Yeah, Greece. Yeah.
Okay, so good. Okay, so there's a small area right here. Okay, today we call it Palestine. Okay, and this is where Israel is also at as well. So this is during Jesus' time. Okay. All right. By the way, this whole area, do you know what this area, what empire this is?
Rome.
This is what we call the Rome Empire. Okay, so they ruled all of this area here. So this is massive amount of land that they had. Okay, so in about 30, a Jewish young teacher comes. His name is Jesus. And he said basically to the Jewish people, I am the Messiah. I am the king that you guys have been waiting for this whole time. In the Old Testament, it talks about Messiah, Messiah, Messiah. And he says, I am he. Okay, 3 years later, he gets crucified. Okay, and he dies as a criminal. But his followers, they come out all of a sudden and they say, oh, he resurrected. He's alive. And then all the Jewish people said, how dare you say that? You guys are all heretics. We're going to kill all of you guys, things like that. Okay? And so that started over here. And so these followers, these Christians, they started to spread all over the Roman Empire eventually. But the Jewish people didn't like them. Okay, because why? They're cults. How can they say that Jesus is God? There's only one God. Okay, so the Jewish people didn't like them. And then when Christians would go to the Roman Empire, they said, hey, Jesus is God. And they were okay with that because the Roman people, they believed in many gods anyways. So they were like, oh, Jesus, one more God? That's fine. But they said, no, he's only one. And they didn't like that. And they didn't like how they didn't worship other gods like Zeus or Hades or other gods like that. Okay, so the Romans, eventually Christianity continued to grow and grow and grow, so much so that it would disturb some of the politics and some of the things that would go on, like idol worship. And we see that in the book of Acts. Like, for example, some of the religious people, they would not like Christianity because imagine it's like somebody came to our church and like took like half the church members away. Then the people here, they would be very angry. Or like people who are making idols, right? They're making like statues, like they don't have business anymore because they're all becoming Christians. Does that make sense? So they're running out of business. So for a lot of different reasons, Christians were persecuted. And this is a picture of Christians being persecuted. They would get crucified like Jesus, but they would burn them, okay, on the stake. And then they would have like gladiator games, and they would throw them as bait. And they would this would be just fun and games for them. Okay? And so this is how they would treat the Christians. Hold on real quick. Okay. So this would happen. So from about 33 to about 300 AD, Christians were persecuted for a very, very long time. So they didn't, like for us, we publicly, we can go to church and things like that. And even in Europe, if you go to Europe, there's a lot of like church buildings, but they didn't have any of that because they had to actually go underground. So they had a lot of house churches, they had a lot of cave churches. Okay, but this guy comes around. Okay, anybody know who he is? It says right here, Constantine. Okay, long story short, he becomes Christian. Okay, and so he says, okay, we're not going to persecute Christianity anymore. Number one, and number two, this Christianity, I'm not going to make you guys all Christians, but this Christian is now allowed. It's not illegal anymore. Does that make sense? But obviously, if the emperor, who's the most powerful person in the whole empire, becomes Christian, then, this is going to soon follow as well. Okay? So this is the Roman Empire. So, so soon afterwards, the Roman Empire becomes Christian. And then Roman Catholic Church comes out of this. Okay, Catholic just means universal. Okay, so this is what we call the Roman Catholic Church. That was the first church. Okay, any questions so far? All right, so we're going to fast forward. A lot of things happen, but we're going to fast forward hundreds of years. And in 1517, this is a very important day because this is when Protestant Reformation happens. Okay, so basically the Roman Catholic Church, they started to become corrupt. And so they started to use religion against people to make money. So they would say things like, Abel, oh, hey, you have sin? Hey, guess what? If you pay me a little, you slip something under the table, you're good. You're good. I have connection with God, so we're good. So those were some of the things that were happening. And so people who started to read the Bible, and they said, this is not in the Bible. This is not biblical. Yeah. Okay? And so they started to protest against it. And that's why they're called Protestant Reformation. Okay? And so this is when all of these different churches came out. So again, before this, it was two main churches, the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. Okay? Anyways, out of the Catholic Church, Lutherans came out, Calvinists came out, okay? And different people came out. Okay? All right. Again, I'm going over this very quickly. If you want to know more, go to YouTube. There's a lot of good videos. Okay. In 1790, so by this time, there's a lot of different denominations. Not as many as today, of course, but there's quite a bit of denominations. So there's quite a bit of splits. Okay? But 1790 is a very, very important day because in America, they had the Great Awakening. Okay? Great Awakening was basically these group of people, significant amount of people, of Christians, they started to really read the Bible for themselves. And basically there was a revival that started in the USA. And so a lot of people who used to be Christians came back as Christians. People who didn't believe in Christianity, they actually became Christians as well. So it was a really, really big, sensational movement in the 1790s. Okay, this is important because during this time when people are reading the Bible more and finding more, there's a guy that comes out. His name is William Miller. Okay? And as he was reading the Bible, he started reading the book of Daniel and Revelation. And in the book of Daniel and Revelation, there are what we call prophecies. And we're going to go over one of them today. Okay? And then he says, in 1844, because of all the different dates, we're going to go over it together. Okay, slowly. Jesus is going to come back in 1844. Okay? And then the people who followed him, they're called Millerites. Why? Because he's Miller. Okay, they're called the Millerite movement. Okay, so still no SDAs. There's Protestants, there's Presbyterians, there's Calvinists, there's Lutherans, okay, there's Baptists, but no Seventh-day Adventists, okay, so far. Okay? I forgot what he was. I forgot whether he was a Baptist or Lutheran. Or maybe a Methodist. I forgot. Anyways, okay, so these group of people, some from Methodist, some from Lutheran, some from all of these different denominations came together. They all said, Jesus is coming back 1844. Okay? But did he come 1844? No. And so they call this the Great Disappointment. Okay? Literally, Great Disappointment. Because, some of these people, they, sold everything. Because Jesus is coming. Why have all this money? Okay?
You know what their low of the week was?
Oh, yeah. This was definitely, it was low of the year for them. Yeah. All right. So, after the Great Disappointment, again, there's only Millerite people. And Adventist just means, Jesus coming back. So they were called Millerite Adventists. No Seventh-day Adventists yet. Okay, just Millerite Adventists. Okay, so after this whole thing happened, a split happens. Majority of the people, 75% of these people, they said, the dates, the calculation is wrong. Okay, so let's study and then let's get the right date. Because these prophecies definitely is talking about Jesus' second coming. But we don't know when. So I think we got the dates wrong. So about 75% said, let's set up a new date. Okay? So the event is correct, but the date is wrong. Does that make sense? And then eventually, like they keep setting new dates, they say keep doing dates, but obviously Jesus didn't come in 1844. And then what happens? It just, like some of them, basically a lot of them, they go back to their churches, their own like denomination, and some of them, they just leave the church altogether because of that. Okay, so majority of them. Okay. About 25%, okay, they said, the date is correct. 1844, we got the date right. But we were wrong about the event. The Bible is not talking about Jesus coming back. Okay? So, even within the 25%, so again, these people said we got the wrong date. These people said, no, we got the right date, just wrong event. Okay? So from here, we're going to split again. These people are going to say, oh, Jesus came in 1844. He just didn't come physically. He came spiritually. So later on, by the way, later on, this influence goes down more. Okay, they didn't directly come from it, but that's what right now. You know what denomination actually believes this to be true? Anybody know?
The slide changed.
Oh, sorry. Anybody know what denomination has the similar idea? Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay, Jehovah's Witnesses. So they say the kingdom is here. That's why they call it Kingdom Hall. Okay, so Jesus has already come. So for the Jehovah's Witnesses, they're just waiting for the number to be filled. The 144,000. Okay, so anyways, that's besides the story. So again, they said, oh, 1844 is correct, and Jesus did come. He just came spiritually. And then there was another group of people. They said, we got the right date. Something else happened. And these people are what we call Seventh-day Adventists. Okay? So they say 1844, date is correct. Something else happened in 1844. Okay? So, before we even go here, even though this is very important, we're going to come back to this a little bit later. Okay? But we're going to first go back to the beginning part of William Miller. Okay? Which is, how did he even get this date, 1844? And how did he convince all of these, like thousands of people, that Jesus is going to come back in 1844? Is that even in the Bible? And so that's what we're going over. We're going to start going over. There's a lot of stuff. So we're going to take a couple of weeks. We're going to take a slow step going forward. Okay? Any questions on anything I've talked about so far?
What is it when they say bridegroom?
Uh-huh.
Like, what's like, how do you use that term?
So there's a parable in the Bible of, so what happened was, in that time when the Bible was written, the New Testament was written, so what happened was let's say I would get engaged. Okay? So once I get engaged, me as a husband, I would have to go and prepare my house that we're going to live in. So the bride is waiting until I come and get her. So the bridegrooms are like, we have even bridegrooms today, right? So like the bride and the bridegroom, their friends, are waiting together for, hey, like, when's my husband going to come? So it's this concept.
Okay.
So the bridegrooms are people who are waiting for Jesus to come back. That's the idea. Yeah. All right. Any other questions about anything here? Okay, so that's where we're going to get to. But we're going to go here first. And then we're going to slowly get to how did SDAs come over here. Okay? All right. Let's go to our groups really quick. And then share these two things. Go for it.
Call that one. Sounds like I do want to. It's not great.
This is too weird. There's a lot of science. Chapters after. Chapters that be one where I was out in the woods and it sounded like the unicorn side of me. Yeah, right? Like a white horse had. guys are like all beige. I don't know whether it was
That is like, oh, right, like iron.
There's nations right after we pass different beasts and creatures, the same thing, more details, everything is converging for this conflict, about Jesus and Satan, to, let's say, bring the power of you're gonna see this about how the church inquire the church, getting to this conflict, and I say that the church was
Like a lot of people say, especially like
and people raised against the church, and they start to reform this information. And it's everything. It's everything in Daniel.
So you guys speak right? Crazy stream with comparisons.
Yeah.
Like even if you thought your dream is crazy, it's just a weird dream.
Because I wash all my clothes and I've had so many of them.
it's fun.
Good, bad, they're all over the place.
Like 2 days.
At my age, I don't remember.
Some of them still live vividly in my mind. Like I remember like hearing prophecy seminars when I was a kid. Those things would give me terrible nightmares. Like I would wake up and no, I remember one of them was people being dismembered. And they like I don't know how these things became so vivid. Like I remember these things. And so they're like people are persecuted. They talk about the persecuted Romans. So Christians back in the day being fed to lions. And for some reason these things became vivid in my sleep and in my dreams. I would wake up crying because I was like, I didn't understand anything. I was being told this is what happened to people that were Christians, and at one point in time I was like, I don't want to be a Christian because if this is the fate that awaits me, I don't understand what's happening here. It was not explained to me. So from these prophecies, it's like when I was a kid, they were just nightmares to me, and I started really questioning a lot of what is the point of Christianity if all we're going to do is die? I don't even know what I'm dying for, but I'm dying. But for me to go wild, I was probably like 8 or 9. Yeah. And just like none of this was explained to me. It was just like, oh, brothers and sisters, we have to be prepared to die for Christ. You know, this is what happened to people back in the day. And I would be like, this is horrible. What are we doing here? And so from there, some of the wildest dreams came from these prophecy seminars. I remember thinking I was in a local went to a local rave party with my dad, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, all these people show up out of nowhere and said the enemy is coming. Here's a gun. And I remember thinking, what are we even fighting? But it always says the enemy's coming. And so we would have people just stationed out, and that was it. So this is how my dreams would go. I go from normal dream to warfare. So another one was I was hiking in the woods, and that's where the whole dismembered picture was like people being dismembered, which is kind of exists. So it would be like normal sleep will turn to this, and I zero understands that. So in terms of like the craziest dream I had, that would probably be it. And some of them, like I still remember really vividly. It terrified me.
Okay, one more minute. One more minute. Go to number 2 if you haven't.
As a kid, no. No, I just felt like I remember trying to figure out a way to get out of prophecy weeks as a kid. Yeah. Yeah, no, when I was a little kid, yeah, I'd be like, no, I don't want to go to Taekwondo. I don't want to go to the message of like, yeah, but, you know, I didn't know how to explain to her, like, I'm terrified Jack squat, you know. Nowadays, yeah, I'm like, okay, cool, more information. That's fine.
All right, let's continue. So once again, William Miller, how did he get this date? He said he saw Book of Daniel and Book of Revelation, and somehow he did calculation and he came up with this date. So it's not like one day he had a dream and he's like, oh, 1844. So nothing like that, right? He actually read the Bible, he said. So we're going to read the Bible together and we're going to see, can we actually get to this date? We're going to start from Daniel chapter 2.
In the second year of his reign,
Nebuchadnezzar.
had dreams. His mind was troubled when he couldn't sleep. So the king summons the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means."
Okay, do you guys understand so far? So who do we have as a main character? We have a king, and we know that he's a king of what empire? Babylon. Okay, he's one of the king of Babylon. Okay, he has a dream one day, and then he can't figure it out. But do you remember what he asked? He says what? To tell him what he had dreamed. So he doesn't say, give me the interpretation. He says, you tell me first what I have dreamed of. Okay? Let's keep going. Richard?
Then the astrologers answered the king, "May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." The king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you'll receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me."
So do you guys see how ridiculous this is? That's a low for them, right? So it's like, I could interpret stuff for you, but if you ask me to tell me your dream, so we don't know exactly why he did this, but he's like, no, I want to know. You tell me the dream and interpret it. Okay, let's keep going.
The astrologers answered the king, "There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans."
Okay, so he's basically saying, you're asking for us to do something that is supernatural. Nobody can do this. Let's keep going.
This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. Okay, so we have a new set of characters that enter into this. Okay? Because why? Daniel and his friends, they were part of this the wise people committee. Okay? Because the king said, you can't tell me my dream and interpret it. I'm going to kill not just you guys, I'm going to kill everybody. Okay? All my council members, basically. And so Daniel and his friends, what do we know about Daniel and his friends? Not from this story, but I mean just from basic knowledge that you guys have of the Bible. Are they Babylonians?
No.
No, they're what?
Students or something like that, right? Didn't
Okay.
they go study
Okay.
and to learn.
Yeah. So they came to Babylon,
Yeah.
right? So where did they come from? They were
They're Israelites.
okay. They're Jews. Okay, they're Israelites. Yes. Okay, they're Israelites that
Were basically
they're studying
captive.
abroad.
They're
No, right? What happened?
They were basically captive.
Yeah. So Babylon came in and said, "Boop. Okay, we're gonna destroy your land. We're gonna take the best from your land, and then we're gonna make them basically our slaves." Okay. And so Daniel and his friends, they're Israelites, so they're not Babylonians, but they were educated in the Babylonian system. Okay. So they don't believe in the same gods that Babylonians believe. They believe in the God of the Old Testament that we believe in as well. So what we call Yahweh. Let's keep going.
The commander of the king's guard had gone out to put death. The wise men of Dan, Roland, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Then explained the matter to king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him.
Okay. So he says, hey, I'm going to come and kill all of you guys. And Daniel says, whoa, give me some time. I could do it. Okay. Let's keep going.
Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision.
Okay. So Daniel goes back, and he has 3 other friends. Okay, and they all go, okay, we need to pray together. We need to pray that, because we're going to die if we don't get this dream and interpretation. So that night, the mystery was revealed, and they had a vision, or Daniel had a vision. Okay, so far so good. No one's lost, right? Everybody's on the wagon together. Let's keep going.
And Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men in Babylon, and said to him, do not execute the wise men in Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, I found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dreams mean.
Okay, remember? So he's in exile, right? And Judah is that area, is the Israelites were living in. Let's keep going.
The king asked Daniel, also called Belshazzar, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these.
Okay, so Daniel already gives us a hint about what these things are. Okay, these dreams are not about right now, not about the past, but what will happen. So these are what we tend to, in the 21st century, what we think of prophecy, right? Someone who can foretell what's going to happen in the future. Does that make sense? So far, so good? So he says, I can't do it. It's not my power, but God told me. Let's keep going.
As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mystery showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind.
It's interesting. He says, God actually gave you this dream. Okay, remember right here, revealer of mystery, which is God. He actually showed you what's going to happen. Okay, so God gave you this dream. And then now I'm going to tell you what it is and I'm going to interpret it. Okay, let's keep going.
Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay.
Okay, so big statue with different kind of metals.
While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth.
Okay, so this is the dream. He saw a statue with different metals. All of a sudden, rock comes, and where does it strike? On the feet. And then it just all dissolves. And then this rock, it becomes a mountain, and it fills the whole earth. Okay, so here's some picture. We don't know if it looked exactly like this, obviously, but this is a illustration. So I'm sure some of you guys who grew up SDA have seen this over and over many different times. It probably appeared in your dream. Okay, so we see different metals. Okay, and then we see a rock comes from the heaven and then crushes this area, and then it gets all crushed.
And that's
Okay.
like a supernatural rock. Like there is no material.
Did it say here?
It just says rock.
It just says rock.
Yeah.
Okay, but it says right here, the rock was cut out, not by human hands. So it seems like he's gonna explain it more in the interpretation, but yeah, it seems like it's not a human rock at least. Yeah. It's some supernatural. All right. 2 questions so far. Okay. I know some of you guys already know the interpretation. Okay, so don't use that interpretation, obviously. But if you had this kind of dream, what would your interpretation of it be? Okay, so you could be creative. Okay, go for it. Go back to your groups. Go for it.
You're gonna get cut down.
What's he knowing?
That'd be the first.
It's hard to unsee it.
Yeah.
So what's your answer?
That would be it. I'm gonna get cut
How
down.
would you interpret it?
Whose statue is that?
I think
It's not the king.
I'm not sure.
What would you think?
It'd be like simple, like
Yeah.
I'm gonna get
cut down.
knocked off my feet.
I'm thinking maybe some of my builders are not building
you have a
correctly.
strong base. You don't want all your most important things at the top with the weak base. You
So
want
I
a strong
think,
base.
Something
Like a good
down,
maybe
no.
of the kingdom.
I know what's things that
So
like based on
what was he wanting?
His kingdom will fall
you
apart.
invested all your
Okay. So why different material?
Yeah, like that is like
So the clay is the weak point.
You have to have a stronger foundation.
So I'd almost say like I would say like my
material and they
at a
want
personal level.
Yeah, it has to be.
Like my mind is but it doesn't matter because I have this really weak spot. Like I have a blind spot, which is
So
like
that's-
5 feet. But it's like a blind spot. Yeah, it's like I'm not gonna see it. It's just like it's the weakest point of the stability. And like
But it hits
it's rock and I'm just like I'm done.
iron.
Gold's supposed
I mean,
to represent.
But like, it's like you're almost like going really prestigious. And all of that is irrelevant because you have this little weakness.
It makes me think like if you think about it like in a hierarchy term, it's like okay, so I'm at the top, I have my soldiers, I have everything moving down the chain. It's gonna destroy me people because if it's mixed material, things that mixed thoughts, some of them may not want to serve me, some of them I don't want to serve them. We just got all these people from Judea that we just conquered. Maybe they're the ones that are gonna bring me down. So therefore, what I should do is probably wipe them all out completely. Therefore, the statue turns into a self-defense. So having the mixed mentality at the bottom.
Or like I feel like the feet are like roots. Like you might
It means that if he doesn't play a stable foundation.
all of that is also like the outside. It's amazing. Like up here,
Well, the rock is
but like it's very like weak footing.
and then the rock.
There's no stability.
Yeah, it is in the good.
As awesome as it is.
Maybe a Trinity.
The rock is but then
He's taking over.
To form an arch. Maybe go in something like this.
like it's not gonna be like the rock like this probably, but you just part of the.
You have several questions.
You get a hammer and hammer into it. Should be deceived, man. Get leprosy.
All right. So now we're going to get into the interpretation. Once again, we had this dream. Now we're going to get to the good part, which is the interpretation of it. So let's see what Daniel says. Whose turn is it? Is it your turn? Okay.
This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your Majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you rule over them all. You are that head of gold.
Huh. Okay, so we get interpretation, pretty solid interpretation, right? So who's this representing?
Babylon.
Babylon. Or the king. Okay. So we have that interpretation. Let's keep going. After you, another kingdom will rise. So right after you, another kingdom will rise. Okay? Inferior to yours. So it's not going to be as strong, right? Gold, silver, gold is stronger. Okay? Next, a third kingdom. So it's not talking about individual. It seems like over here it's talking about like an individual, right? It says you are the king, but he keeps going and then it says now kingdom, 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 kingdom. So it's obviously talking about kingdoms. Okay, so it's Babylon. We know Babylon for sure because it says it right here, but it doesn't really tell us who next will be. Okay, after you, another kingdom will rise inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, it will crush and break all the others. So this is very unique. Okay, so it seems like, yes, gold is strong, but iron is the strongest. And it's going to break other kingdoms as well.
Thank you.
Okay?
Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be divided, a divided kingdom. It will have some of the strengths of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay, as the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw that the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than the iron mixes with clay.
So very interesting, right? So we have Babylon here, and then we don't know these three kingdoms, but afterwards, okay, so far it's one united, iron, very, very strong, but when it comes here, what happens? The nations, it's gonna what? It's gonna divide. It's actually going to divide. And some of them are gonna be strong, like iron, and some of them, clay. It's gonna be very weak. And no matter how much you try to bring them together, it's not going to happen. Okay, let's continue on.
In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. The rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces.
Okay. So it tells us about this rock. So what does this rock represent? What does it represent?
God.
Okay. Right here, God of heaven will set up a kingdom. So it's God's kingdom. So all of these things, if you think about it, these are all kingdoms. Will be Babylonian kingdom. Right now, we don't know what silver and bronze and iron is right now. But when we read on, we're going to know more. And then we know that this is a divided kingdom. Sorry. But then we know that after this, what's going to happen? God's kingdom will be established. Does that make sense? So whoever is here, this is what we call end of times. Because it's right before God's going to come. God's kingdom will be set. Does that make sense? So it seems like it's giving us some kind of history of what's going to happen. We're going to see empires, kingdoms. But after this iron kingdom, this will be no more empires, but it'll be divided. And once it's divided, what's going to happen? God will come.
Oh, so like now we have nation states and dragon kingdom.
And that's how we see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, I'm going to just tell you guys how most churches interpret this. And I'm going to show you, as I told you guys more, we're going to see more of this pattern. And we're going to show you why we think it's these things. Okay? So just for now, just take it for what it is. Okay, so this we know for sure. Why? Because Daniel himself said, you are the head. So it's you. And then we know that the second one, okay, we know that it's Middle Persia. We know this because Daniel actually infers to it. He says it's going to be the kingdom after yours. And then in history, we see that it's actually two different empires, Middle and Persians. Actually, they come together and they take over Babylon. Okay. After this, bronze. If you guys actually saw bronze, the description was they're going to rule the earth. So that means that it's actually going to get bigger and bigger. Okay? That doesn't mean that they were stronger. It just means that they actually furthered their kingdom. we know that this was Greece. And then with Greece, who was the great emperor that like went crazy and tried to conquer the whole world? Alexander the Great. Okay, so we see that. Okay, after Greece, do you know who the next empire was?
Persia?
It was the Romans. And as you guys saw, as you guys see in history, Romans, like, they were really, really strong. They did a lot of things right. Okay? And so again, we saw how strong the iron was. Okay? Do you guys know that? Do you guys know what empire shows up after Rome?
Where's the Ottoman Empire?
We don't have them. They were not strong enough.
What?
Yeah.
The what? The Ottoman was at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, what empire comes afterwards? Do you guys know? Okay, there is no empire afterwards.
China.
Okay? At least in this region right here. Okay, at least in this region, there is none. Because what happens is Roman, instead of another empire coming in, Roman actually, they fragment into different like states. Okay? And then we have the modern day Europe today, it's all split up. Okay, and then right now, even now, so we think that this is the present day. It was from when the Roman Empire collapsed until today. So some people say we're at the toenails of the end times. We're like at the end, right here, right here. Okay? All right. Let's keep going and then we'll finish.
It makes sense because 10 tribals invaded Rome, so 10 fingers. That's something that fits exactly when the Roman Empire starts to fall.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Whose turn is it to read? Minu, if you don't mind reading for us.
The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true and its interpretation is trustworthy.
One more, Minu.
Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of God and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery."
Okay. Let's go to these two questions, and then we'll bring it to a wrap. Go for it.
I think God gave this king to Nebuchadnezzar because having a promise to his life.
In the book of Nebuchadnezzar,
God is
it's because
You don't
I think
want
that
the king to
he
execute
needs
everyone,
to do
so
something
for the
for the
kings in general, they always
So this king
set themselves as like a god.
allowed Daniel to
So I believe that was a Bible that says you are the king, but I am the God.
So I think God
Set yourself.
to keep his promise.
When my kingdom is up, the kingdom of
So it's one of the ideas.
The question is why this guy specifically? Why didn't he go to like the Roman Caesar and be like, hey, by the way, Rome came down. Yeah, but if any of those timelines that are present, he could present it to any one of them. Like, why did they have to keep this guy? Why wasn't it
the
before?
evidence that he then gave conveyed to the king.
Because it could have been like, oh, there could have been a crown and then the head,
How
and then so forth. So it's like, why this guy?
they just do that. God help.
Or do you know? I'm just poking at it. I'm just poking at it now.
unless you just study
God knows the time to do. God controls everything.
He uses his spirit to just look at other empires.
He's in the control. Maybe he's waiting to say, right next to and then the king gonna start to have some attitudes and he's gonna go straight for where God will speak. For any reason.
Yeah, because he could have just given this whole thing to
Well, I guess
Daniel,
what
skipped over Nebuchadnezzar and said, "You're my prophet."
God has purpose.
That's what it is, right? So the prophecy said who's telling what is going to happen.
I think it's also
The metals were representing what was going to happen in the future.
I think also the target audience, because it might have been like a bunch of people that were like something significant here. So it's like it would be like like he was saying, a very good turning point for things to follow like chain of events. Instead of just dropping into a prophet and saying, "Go tell the king," and we're done. So they had the conquerors, and then also the dream, people died over it, but it's just the chain of events.
Karen, are you going to tell us the answer? We like left it until next week based on time.
Yeah. Why?
We have to wait till next week to hear why.
Yeah, because I started.
This one, number one?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. The Bible doesn't say. Yeah.
We are full speculation.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I started poking out, like, he could have given it to a prophet.
I think one of you guys, I think said a pretty good. I think that's a pretty good theory. This idea of like, understand that you're a king and you are, he was one of the first empires who had so much. But it's like, remember, I'm God. Yeah. Because there's another chapter afterwards where like he gets big-headed and then God humbles him. So maybe it was kind of a warning beforehand.
I read a book on Alexander the Great. He had a lot of visions too, not related to
Yeah, he actually read back on Daniel, and he says, "Oh, I am." He actually read into this and said, "I am this. I am the next empire."
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So I mean, there's so much legend about Alexander, so we don't know if this is like 100% true or not.
He was the bronze.
Yeah. That's how we interpret it nowadays. But
I have a great biography if you want to. Yeah.
That dude was wild.
Yeah. It was like in his 20s.
all right, let's come back together. Okay. So these are just a couple of thoughts. So again, obviously, one thing for sure is it seems like if our interpretation is correct, this is exactly how it came to be. Later, we're going to see Daniel actually in Book of Daniel. Again, Daniel is like right here, right? Actually, he's like more right here because he actually served Babylonian and Middle Persians, right? But he actually tells us about Greece as well. So it's pretty crazy. Okay, these three we know for sure because the Bible actually tells us. These two, I mean, most people say it is Rome. And then here it gets into wildly different speculation. Some people do actually say it is Ottoman. Yeah. Some people do. All right. So one thing for sure is God told Daniel a vision, and then again it comes true. And so again, people who are reading the Bible, they read this and they go, "Oh, there's something supernatural about this." Why? Because even before it happened, God actually showed through a vision, and these things actually have happened. Okay? These are just a couple of other thoughts, random thoughts, that might be helpful for you or not. I think the statue itself, number one, it shows you the frailty of human kingdom. Right? It's like top heavy. Like weight-wise, like it's not, this is going to fall. And it kind of shows like how every human kingdom, like eventually it falls. Okay. Second thing, contradiction of human evolution. You know how evolution, the idea of evolution is we're continuing to progress. It's like getting better and better and better and better. If anything, this statue actually shows you the contradiction of it. It actually gets worse and worse. It goes from the best, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse, and it goes to dirt. And so that's what like the Bible shows us too. Like biblically, it shows us how like we're magnificent creatures, but because of sin, we actually become worse and worse and worse, and we become more corrupted. Okay, maybe it's not. Degeneration of morality. So again, we see morality getting worse, but increase in force. The metal strength, it actually gets stronger. Okay, especially when we get to the iron part, it gets very, very strong. Thank you for.
Oh, I'm iron. His nickname's iron.
Oh, okay. And then obviously, lastly, most importantly, this idea is that Jesus is going to come back. If this is all true, which we see in history is true, of course we could have wrong interpretation, but at least these three we know it's true. Okay? Then this is going to happen as well. Okay? So I think those are just important thoughts to consider. We're going to go over review questions and some other questions, and then we'll finish for today. But we'll continue. We'll continue on with Daniel. Okay, but this is just, I'm giving you kind of a glimpse. But later on, this is important because we will refer back to this statue. Okay, so let's go back, and then let's finish.